Crop diversity and climate resilience building food security in a changing climate agriculture is entering a period of unprecedented change. Around the world, farmers are facing rising temperatures, shifting rainfall patterns, more frequent droughts, floods, storms, and the growing spread of pests and diseases. These environmental changes are affecting agricultural productivity and creating new risks for food systems that support billions of people. Crop diversity and climate resilience building food security At the same time, global food security remains under pressure. Hundreds of millions of people continue to experience hunger, while billions more face varying degrees of food insecurity. As populations grow and climate conditions become increasingly unpredictable, ensuring a stable and reliable food supply has become one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. Modern agriculture depends heavily on a relatively small number of crops. Rice, wheat, and maize provide a large share of the calories consumed worldwide. While these crops have helped feed a growing global population, dependence on a limited number of species also creates vulnerability. When environmental conditions change or new biological threats emerge, entire production systems can be placed at risk. One of nature's most powerful responses to uncertainty is diversity. Throughout history, farmers and communities have cultivated thousands of crop species and countless varieties adapted to different climates, soils, cultures, and growing conditions. This diversity represents a vast reservoir of genetic resources that can help agriculture adapt to changing environments. Crop diversity includes the variety of crop species we cultivate. The diversity found within each crop species, traditional farmer-developed landraces, and the wild relatives from which many crops originated. Together, these forms of diversity provide the biological foundation for resilience, adaptation, and long-term food security. In this module, we will explore how crop diversity strengthens agricultural systems, reduces vulnerability to climate-related shocks, supports stable food production, and contributes to resilient food systems capable of meeting future challenges. We will examine the scientific evidence, the role of genetic diversity, the importance of conservation, and the practical strategies being used around the world to build climate-resilient agriculture. Understanding crop diversity is not simply about understanding plants. It is about understanding how biodiversity, agriculture, climate adaptation, food security, and human well-being are interconnected within a complex and rapidly changing world. We will examine diversity at multiple levels, including diversity among crop species, diversity within crop species, traditional farmer-developed varieties known as landraces, and the wild relatives that contribute valuable genetic traits to modern agriculture. You will also learn how climate change affects agricultural systems. Rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, extreme weather events, and expanding pest and disease pressures are transforming growing conditions around the world. Understanding these pressures is essential for understanding why resilient agricultural systems are becoming increasingly important. A central theme of this module is the relationship between diversity and resilience. We will explore how biological diversity helps agricultural systems absorb shocks, adapt to changing conditions, and continue functioning even when individual crops or varieties face environmental stress. You will also examine how crop diversity contributes to food security. Diverse agricultural systems can help stabilize production, reduce risk, improve nutrition, and support the livelihoods of farming communities. In a world facing increasing uncertainty, diversity acts as a form of biological insurance that helps safeguard food supplies. Another important objective is understanding the conservation of genetic resources. We will explore why protecting crop varieties, traditional landraces, seed collections, and wild relatives is essential for future agricultural adaptation. These resources provide the raw genetic material needed to develop crops capable of thriving under changing climatic conditions. Finally, we will apply systems thinking to agriculture and climate adaptation. Rather than viewing crops, farmers, ecosystems, and food systems as separate components, we will examine how they interact within a larger system. This perspective helps reveal how decisions made today can influence resilience, sustainability, and food security for future generations. As we move through the module, keep these learning objectives in mind. Together, they provide a framework for understanding how crop diversity supports resilient agriculture and why it is increasingly recognized as a critical component of climate adaptation strategies worldwide. Before we begin exploring the science of crop diversity and climate resilience, it is useful to understand what this module aims to accomplish. Climate change is creating complex challenges for agriculture, food systems, and rural livelihoods. Addressing these challenges requires more than simply understanding individual crops or farming practices. It requires an appreciation of how biological diversity contributes to adaptation, resilience, and long-term sustainability. By the end of this module, you will be able to explain what crop diversity is and why it matters. Crop diversity is one of the most important yet often overlooked foundations of global food security. For thousands of years, farmers have cultivated a wide range of crops and crop varieties adapted to different climates, soils, landscapes, and cultural traditions. This diversity has enabled agriculture to thrive across an extraordinary range of environmental conditions and has provided humanity with the biological resources needed to adapt to change. Today, however, agriculture faces growing challenges. Climate change is increasing temperatures, altering rainfall patterns, intensifying droughts and floods, and expanding the range of pests and diseases. These changes are creating new risks for agricultural production at a time when global demand for food continues to rise. Modern food systems also depend heavily on a relatively small number of crops. Rice, wheat, and maize provide a significant share of the world's food supply. While these crops are essential to global nutrition, dependence on a limited number of species and varieties can increase vulnerability when environmental conditions become unstable. Crop diversity helps reduce this vulnerability. Agricultural systems that contain a wider range of crops and crop varieties are generally more resilient to climatic shocks. Different crops respond differently to environmental stress. When drought, heat, flooding, or disease affects one crop, others may continue to perform well, helping to stabilize production and reduce overall risk. The benefits of crop diversity extend beyond production stability. Diverse agricultural systems often support healthier soils, more effective pest management, greater biodiversity, improved resource efficiency, and more nutritious diets. These benefits strengthen both ecological and social resilience. At the genetic level, diversity provides the raw material for adaptation. Traits such as drought tolerance, heat tolerance, salinity tolerance, flood resistance, and disease resistance are often found within traditional crop varieties and wild relatives. Plant breeders depend upon these genetic resources to develop improved varieties capable of thriving under changing environmental conditions. The conservation of crop diversity has therefore become a global priority. Seed banks, gene banks, botanical collections, research institutions, farming communities, and international organizations are working together to preserve and utilize genetic resources before they are lost through genetic erosion. Protecting this diversity helps ensure that future generations will have access to the biological tools needed to respond to emerging challenges. Research from around the world increasingly demonstrates that crop diversification can strengthen agricultural resilience. Diverse farming systems often experience lower production variability, improved recovery following environmental shocks, and greater capacity to adapt to uncertain future conditions. While crop diversity is not a complete solution to climate change, it represents an important component of broader adaptation and food security strategies. This module explores how crop diversity contributes to climate resilience, examines the scientific evidence supporting diversification, and highlights the role of genetic resources in building sustainable food systems. The central message is straightforward but powerful. Diversity increases options, and in a world characterized by uncertainty, options create resilience. As climate change accelerates and agricultural systems face mounting pressures, preserving and utilizing crop diversity may prove to be one of humanity's most valuable investments in food security, sustainability, and long-term well-being. As we approach the conclusion of this module, it is useful to review some of the key terms and concepts concepts encountered throughout our discussion. Understanding these terms will help reinforce the relationships between crop diversity, climate resilience, food security, and agricultural sustainability. Adaptation. Adaptation refers to adjustments made by organisms, communities, or systems in response to changing environmental conditions. In agriculture, adaptation includes practices, technologies, and biological traits that help crops and farming systems cope with climate change and other challenges. Adaptive capacity. Adaptive capacity is the ability of a system to respond to change, recover from disturbances, and adjust to new conditions. Agricultural systems with high adaptive capacity are generally more resilient to environmental stress. Agricultural diversity. Agricultural diversity, often called agrobiodiversity, includes the variety of crops, livestock, genetic resources, species, ecosystems, and ecological interactions that support food production. Crop diversity is one component of this broader concept. Biodiversity. Biodiversity refers to the variety of life on Earth, including diversity within species, between species, and among ecosystems. Biodiversity supports ecological stability, resilience, and the functioning of natural and agricultural systems. Climate change. Climate change refers to long-term changes in temperature, precipitation patterns, and other aspects of Earth's climate system. Human activities, particularly greenhouse gas emissions, are the primary drivers of contemporary climate change. Climate resilience. Climate resilience is the ability of a system to anticipate, withstand, adapt to, and recover from climate-related stresses and disturbances. Crop diversity. Crop diversity refers to the variety of crops and crop varieties cultivated by humans. It includes diversity among species, diversity within species, traditional land races, and crop wild relatives. Crop diversification. Crop diversification is the practice of increasing the variety of crops or crop varieties within an agricultural system. Diversification can occur through crop rotations, intercropping, mixed farming systems, or the introduction of new crops. Crop genetic erosion. Crop genetic erosion refers to the loss of genetic diversity within crop species. This often occurs when traditional varieties are replaced by a smaller number of genetically uniform varieties. Crop wild relatives. Crop wild relatives are wild plant species related to cultivated crops. They often contain valuable genetic traits such as drought tolerance, disease resistance, and heat tolerance that can be used in crop improvement. Drought tolerance. Drought tolerance is the ability of a plant to survive and maintain productivity under conditions of limited water availability. Ecological redundancy. Ecological redundancy refers to the presence of multiple species or varieties capable of performing similar functions within an ecosystem. This redundancy can enhance resilience by reducing dependence on any single species. Ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are benefits provided by natural ecosystems, including pollination, soil formation, nutrient cycling, water purification, climate regulation, and pest control. Extreme weather events. Extreme weather events include unusually severe droughts, floods, storms, heat waves, wildfires, and other climatic events that can disrupt ecosystems, agriculture, and human societies. Food security. Food security exists when all people have consistent access to sufficient, safe, nutritious, and affordable food that supports healthy and active lives. Gene bank. A gene bank is a facility that conserves seeds, plant tissues, or genetic material for future research, breeding, and conservation purposes. Genetic diversity. Genetic diversity refers to variation in genes within a species. It provides the biological foundation for adaptation, evolution, and resilience. Heat tolerance. Heat tolerance is the ability of a crop to maintain growth and productivity under elevated temperatures and periods of extreme heat. Landrace. A landrace is a traditional, locally adapted crop variety that has evolved through farmer selection and adaptation to specific environmental conditions. Monoculture. Monoculture is the cultivation of a single crop species or variety over a large area and often over multiple growing seasons. While efficient under certain conditions, monocultures may increase vulnerability to pests, diseases, and environmental change. These concepts form the foundation of the discussions presented throughout this module. Together, they help explain why crop diversity is increasingly recognized as an essential component of climate adaptation, agricultural resilience, and long-term food security. In the next glossary section, we will review additional terms from R through W that further expand our understanding of resilience, systems thinking, and sustainable agriculture. In this final glossary section, we review additional terms that help explain how agricultural systems function, adapt, and respond to environmental change. Together with the concepts introduced in the previous glossary slide, these terms provide a useful vocabulary for understanding crop diversity, climate resilience, and sustainable food systems. Nutrient cycling. Nutrient cycling is the movement and exchange of nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium through soils, plants, animals, microorganisms, and the environment. Healthy nutrient cycling supports soil fertility and agricultural productivity. Phenotype. A phenotype refers to the observable characteristics of an organism, such as its size, shape, color, growth pattern, or stress tolerance. Phenotypes result from interactions between genetic makeup and environmental conditions. Plant breeding. Plant breeding is the science and practice of developing improved crop varieties by selecting and combining desirable traits such as higher yields, disease resistance, drought tolerance, or improved nutritional quality. Pollination. Pollination is the transfer of pollen from one flower to another, enabling fertilization and seed production. Many crops depend on insects, birds, bats, or other animals for successful pollination. Resilience. Resilience is the ability of a system to absorb disturbances, adapt to changing conditions, recover from shocks, and continue functioning effectively. In agriculture, resilience is essential for managing climate risks and environmental uncertainty. Risk management. Risk management refers to strategies and practices used to reduce vulnerability to uncertainty and potential losses. Crop diversification is an important risk management strategy because it spreads risk across multiple crops and varieties. Salinity tolerance. Salinity tolerance is the ability of a plant to survive and remain productive in soils or water containing elevated salt concentrations. This trait is becoming increasingly important in regions affected by irrigation-induced salinity and sea level rise. Seed bank. A seed bank is a specialized facility that stores seeds under controlled conditions to preserve genetic diversity for future use in research, breeding, and conservation programs. Species diversity. Species diversity refers to the variety of different species present within an ecosystem or agricultural landscape. Higher species diversity often contributes to greater ecological stability and resilience. Stress tolerance. Stress tolerance is the ability of a plant to withstand adverse environmental conditions such as drought, heat, flooding, salinity, nutrient deficiency, or disease pressure. Sustainability. Sustainability refers to meeting present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainable agriculture seeks to balance productivity, environmental stewardship, economic viability, and social well-being. Systems thinking. Systems thinking is an approach that focuses on relationships and interactions among components of a complex system rather than examining each component in isolation. It helps reveal how climate, biodiversity, agriculture, food security, and human well-being are interconnected. Traditional varieties. Traditional varieties are crop varieties that have been maintained and developed by farmers over generations. They often possess unique genetic characteristics and adaptation to local environmental conditions. Vulnerability. Vulnerability refers to the degree to which a system is susceptible to harm from environmental, economic, or social stresses. In agriculture, vulnerability is influenced by exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. Water use efficiency. Water use efficiency describes a plant's ability to produce biomass or yield using available water effectively. Crops with higher water use efficiency are often better adapted to drought-prone environments. Wild relatives. Wild relatives are naturally occurring plant species closely related to cultivated crops. They represent an important source of genetic traits that can be used to improve crop resilience and productivity. Yield stability. Yield stability refers to the ability of a crop or farming system to maintain relatively consistent production over time despite environmental variability and changing conditions. As we conclude the glossary section, it is worth noting that many of these concepts are closely connected. Resilience depends upon diversity. Adaptation depends upon genetic variation. Sustainability depends upon healthy ecosystems. Food security depends upon resilient agricultural systems. Together, these concepts provide a framework for understanding one of the central messages of this module. Crop diversity is not merely a biological resource. It is a foundation for adaptation, resilience, sustainability, and long-term food security in a rapidly changing world. In the next section, we will test our understanding through a series of review questions and exercises that encourage us to apply the concepts explored throughout the module. To reinforce the concepts explored throughout this module, take a few moments to complete the following exercises. These activities are designed to encourage critical thinking and help connect theoretical concepts with real-world agricultural challenges. Exercise 1. Identifying climate risks. Select a region or country that is familiar to you. Identify 3 climate-related challenges that agriculture in that region currently faces or may face in the future. These challenges could include drought, flooding, heat waves, water scarcity, salinity, changing rainfall patterns, pest outbreaks, or other climate-related stresses. For each challenge, consider how it might affect agricultural productivity, food security, and rural livelihoods. Exercise 2. Mapping crop diversity. Think about the crops commonly grown in your region. How many different crop species are cultivated? Are multiple varieties grown within those species? Can you identify traditional varieties, local landraces, or crop wild relatives that may still exist in the area? Reflect on how this diversity contributes to agricultural resilience and adaptation. Exercise 3. Diversity as risk management. Imagine that you are advising a farmer who currently grows only a single crop. Develop 3 recommendations for increasing diversity within the farming system. Your suggestions might include introducing additional crop species, using multiple varieties, implementing crop rotations, integrating trees through agroforestry, or combining crops and livestock. For each recommendation, explain how it could reduce risk and improve resilience. Exercise 4. Evaluating future adaptation options. Climate change is expected to create new agricultural challenges over the coming decades. Choose one major crop and identify the traits that may become increasingly important for its future success. Examples might include drought tolerance, heat tolerance, flood resistance, salinity tolerance, pest resistance, or improved water use efficiency. Discuss how genetic diversity could help breeders develop these traits. Exercise 5. Systems Thinking Analysis. Using the systems thinking framework discussed in this module, create a simple chain of relationships linking the following concepts: climate change, crop diversity, agricultural resilience, food security, human well-being. Consider how changes in one component influence the others and identify any feedback loops that may exist within the system. Exercise 6. Conservation Priorities. Imagine that you are responsible for allocating funding to support agricultural resilience. Would you prioritize conservation of traditional crop varieties, expansion of gene banks, crop breeding programs, farmer education and extension services, climate-resilient agricultural infrastructure, or a combination of these approaches? Explain your reasoning and discuss how your choices contribute to long-term food security. These exercises highlight an important theme running throughout the module. Crop diversity is not simply a scientific concept to be understood. It is a practical resource that can be applied to real-world challenges involving agriculture, climate adaptation, resilience, and food security. By analyzing problems, evaluating options, and considering future scenarios, we begin to appreciate how diversity functions as a strategic asset in an increasingly uncertain world. The next section will test your understanding through a short quiz covering the key concepts presented throughout the module. Let us now review a sample response to exercise 1. The objective of this exercise was to identify climate-related risks affecting agriculture and consider how those risks influence food production, livelihoods, and food security. For this example, let us consider India, a country where agriculture supports hundreds of millions of people and remains highly dependent on climatic conditions. The first major climate-related challenge is increasing heat stress. Rising temperatures and more frequent heat waves can reduce crop yields, particularly for crops such as wheat that are sensitive to high temperatures during critical growth stages. Heat stress can also affect livestock productivity, increase irrigation demand, and reduce labor productivity in agricultural communities. The second challenge is changing rainfall patterns. Many regions of India depend heavily on the monsoon. Climate change is making rainfall more variable, with some areas experiencing drought while others face intense rainfall and flooding. Unpredictable rainfall can disrupt planting schedules, reduce crop yields, increase soil erosion, and create uncertainty for farmers. The third challenge is the expansion of pests and diseases. Warmer temperatures and changing environmental conditions can allow insects, pathogens, and weeds to spread into new regions. Farmers may face greater crop losses and increased production costs as they attempt to manage these emerging threats. Together, these challenges affect agricultural productivity, farm incomes, food prices, and food security. Communities that depend heavily on agriculture may experience increased vulnerability when climate-related disruptions become more frequent. Now, consider how crop diversity can contribute to resilience. A farmer relying on a single crop variety may be highly vulnerable if that variety is affected by drought, heat, or disease. In contrast, a farmer cultivating multiple crops or varieties may have a greater chance that at least some crops will continue producing under adverse conditions. Drought-tolerant varieties may perform during dry years. Flood-tolerant varieties may survive periods of excessive rainfall. Disease-resistant varieties may reduce losses from emerging pathogens. In this way, crop diversity helps spread risk and increases the capacity of agricultural systems to adapt to changing environmental conditions. The key lesson from this exercise is that climate risks rarely occur in isolation. Multiple stresses often interact simultaneously. Building resilience therefore requires a combination of adaptation strategies, including improved management practices, technological innovation, and the conservation and use of crop diversity. When we examine real-world agricultural systems through this lens, it becomes clear why diversity is increasingly viewed as a critical component of climate adaptation and long-term food security. Let us now review a sample response to exercise 2. The purpose of this exercise was to explore crop diversity within a real agricultural landscape and examine how that diversity contributes to resilience. For this example, let us again consider India, one of the most agriculturally diverse countries in the world. India cultivates a remarkable range of crops across its different climatic zones. Major cereals include rice, wheat, maize, millet, and sorghum. Farmers also grow pulses such as chickpea, pigeon pea, lentils, and mung beans. Oilseeds, fruits, vegetables, spices, sugarcane, cotton, tea, coffee, and numerous other crops contribute to agricultural production and rural livelihoods. Beyond the diversity of crop species, there is also significant diversity within individual crops. Rice alone includes thousands of traditional and improved varieties adapted to different environmental conditions. Some varieties tolerate drought, while others perform well in flood-prone regions. Certain varieties are adapted to saline soils, whereas others are valued for their nutritional qualities, flavor, or cultural significance. Similar diversity exists within wheat, millet, pulses, and many other crops. Traditional landraces remain particularly important in some regions. These locally adapted varieties have been developed through generations of farmer selection and often possess characteristics that enable them to perform under specific environmental conditions. For example, farmers in arid regions may maintain drought-tolerant land races that survive under limited rainfall. Mountain communities may cultivate varieties adapted to cooler temperatures and shorter growing seasons. Coastal farmers may rely on crops capable of tolerating saline conditions. Crop wild relatives also form part of this diversity. Wild species related to rice, wheat, millet, legumes, and other crops continue to exist in natural ecosystems. Although these plants may not be cultivated commercially, they contain valuable genetic traits that can support future crop improvement. Now consider how this diversity contributes to resilience. Imagine a farming system that depends entirely on a single crop variety. If drought occurs, if a disease outbreak develops, or if temperatures exceed the tolerance limits of that variety, production losses may be severe. In contrast, a diverse agricultural system contains multiple biological responses to environmental stress. Some crops may tolerate drought, others may resist disease, some may mature earlier and avoid heat stress, others may continue producing under excessive rainfall. Because different crops and varieties respond differently to environmental conditions, diversity helps stabilize production and reduce risk. This diversity also supports food security. A wider range of crops contributes to more balanced diets, provides multiple sources of income, and reduces dependence on a single commodity or growing season. The exercise illustrates an important principle discussed throughout this module. Crop diversity exists at multiple levels. There is diversity among species. There is diversity within species. There are traditional land races developed by farmers. And there are wild relatives that provide additional genetic resources. Together, these forms of diversity create a reservoir of adaptive capacity that helps agricultural systems respond to environmental uncertainty. The key takeaway is that resilience is not created by a single crop or a single technology. It emerges from diversity itself. The broader the range of crops, varieties, and genetic resources available within a farming system, the greater its ability to adapt, recover, and continue functioning under changing conditions. This understanding helps explain why conserving and utilizing crop diversity remains one of the most important strategies for building climate-resilient agriculture and strengthening long-term food security. Let us now review a sample response to exercise 3. In this exercise, we imagine advising a farmer who currently relies on a single crop. The goal was to identify practical ways to increase diversity within the farming system and explain how those changes could improve resilience. For this example, let us assume the farmer cultivates only wheat on a small farm located in a region experiencing increasing climate variability. Recommendation 1. Introduce additional crop species. The first recommendation would be to diversify beyond a single crop by introducing additional species such as legumes, oilseeds, vegetables, or millet. For example, wheat could be combined with chickpeas, lentils, or pigeon peas. These crops often respond differently to environmental conditions and can provide additional sources of food and income. This diversification reduces dependence on a single crop. If drought, disease, or market conditions negatively affect wheat production, the farmer still has other crops contributing to household income and food security. Legumes provide an additional benefit because they help improve soil fertility by fixing atmospheric nitrogen, reducing dependence on synthetic fertilizers. Recommendation 2. Adopt multiple varieties of the same crop. The second recommendation would be to cultivate more than one variety of wheat rather than relying on a single variety. One variety might be drought tolerant. Another might possess stronger disease resistance. A third might mature earlier and avoid late-season heat stress. Because different varieties respond differently to environmental conditions, planting several varieties spreads biological risk. Even if one variety performs poorly during a particular season, others may continue producing acceptable yields. This strategy is particularly valuable under climate change, where weather patterns are becoming less predictable and farmers face increasing uncertainty. Recommendation 3. Implement crop rotations. The third recommendation would be to introduce a structured crop rotation system. Instead of planting wheat continuously, the farmer could alternate wheat with legumes, oilseeds, or other crops over successive growing seasons. Crop rotations provide several important benefits. They help break pest and disease cycles. They improve soil structure and nutrient cycling. They reduce weed pressure. They enhance water use efficiency and overall soil health. Research has shown that diversified crop rotations can increase resilience and help maintain productivity under adverse growing conditions, including drought. By improving soil health and reducing biological pressures, crop rotation strengthens the long-term sustainability of the farming system. Now let us consider the combined effect of these recommendations. Each recommendation contributes to resilience in a different way. Adding new crop species increases diversity at the species level. Using multiple varieties increases diversity within a species. Crop rotations introduce diversity over time. Together, these strategies create multiple layers of protection against environmental and economic uncertainty. Importantly, diversification does not mean abandoning productivity. The objective is not simply to grow more crops. The objective is to create a farming system that can continue functioning effectively when conditions become difficult. Climate change is increasing the frequency of environmental shocks. Droughts, floods, heat waves, pest outbreaks, and market disruptions are becoming more common. Agricultural systems designed around a single crop and a single variety may struggle to cope with these challenges. Diversified systems often possess greater flexibility and adaptive capacity. They provide farmers with more options. They reduce vulnerability to individual threats, and they increase the likelihood that at least part of the system will remain productive under adverse conditions. The key lesson from this exercise is that resilience can be actively managed. Farmers do not have to wait for climate change to create problems before taking action. By increasing diversity today, they can strengthen their ability to cope with the uncertainties of tomorrow. This practical application of crop diversity demonstrates why diversification is increasingly recognized as one of the most effective and accessible strategies for building climate-resilient agriculture. Welcome to the Knowledge Check section. This short assessment provides an opportunity to review and reinforce the key concepts explored throughout this module. Before viewing each answer slide, take a moment to consider your response. The goal is not simply to recall facts, but to think about the relationships between climate change, crop diversity, resilience, adaptation, and food security. Let us begin. Which of the following best describes crop diversity? A. Growing a single crop over a large area. B. Growing multiple crop species and varieties. C. Using only genetically modified crops. D. Increasing fertilizer application. Pause the video if you would like additional time to consider your answer. The correct answer is B. Growing multiple crop species and varieties. Crop diversity includes diversity among crop species, diversity within species, traditional land races, and crop wild relatives. This diversity spreads risk and strengthens resilience against environmental change. Why is genetic diversity important? A. It increases pesticide use. B. It reduces biodiversity. C. It provides traits that support adaptation. D. It eliminates environmental risks. Pause the video and consider your answer. The correct answer is C. Genetic diversity provides traits that support adaptation. Characteristics such as drought tolerance, heat tolerance, flood tolerance, salinity tolerance, and disease resistance originate from genetic variation within crop populations. Without genetic diversity, adaptation becomes much more difficult. Which climate-related challenge can crop diversity help address? A. Drought. B. Heat stress. C. Disease outbreaks. D. All of the above. Take a moment to think about your answer. The correct answer is D. All of the above. Different crops and varieties respond differently to environmental stress. As a result, diversity helps reduce overall vulnerability and improves resilience across agricultural systems. What is genetic erosion? A. Soil degradation. B. Loss of crop genetic diversity. C. Crop rotation. D. Seed storage. Pause the video and consider your response. The correct answer is B. Genetic erosion is the loss of crop genetic diversity. When traditional varieties disappear, valuable genetic traits may be lost as well. This reduces future adaptation options and can increase agricultural vulnerability. Why are diversified farming systems generally more resilient? A. They depend on one crop. B. They reduce environmental variability. C. They spread risk across multiple crops. D. They eliminate climate change impacts. Pause the video and choose your answer. The correct answer is C. Diversified farming systems spread risk across multiple crops and varieties. If one crop is affected by drought, pests, disease, or extreme weather, other crops may continue producing. This improves yield stability, food security, and resilience. Now let us apply systems thinking. Imagine a region that relies heavily on a single maize variety. Climate change increases drought frequency and pest outbreaks. Which strategy is most likely to improve resilience? A. Increase fertilizer use. B. Expand the same maize variety. C. Increase crop and varietal diversity. D. Reduce seed conservation efforts. Consider how diversity influences risk, adaptation, and resilience before viewing the answer. The correct answer is C. Increasing crop and varietal diversity spreads risk, improves adaptive capacity, and strengthens resilience against drought, pests, diseases, and other climate-related stresses. The key insight is simple. Resilience emerges from diversity. Let us review the key messages from this module. Climate change is increasing agricultural risk worldwide. Modern food systems depend heavily on a limited number of crops and varieties. Crop diversity spreads risk across species and varieties. Genetic diversity provides the traits needed for adaptation. Diversified farming systems are generally more resilient than monocultures. And ultimately, food security depends upon biodiversity. Crop diversity is not simply an agricultural issue. It is a foundation of climate adaptation, food security, and human well-being. As climate change continues to reshape agricultural systems, protecting crop diversity becomes increasingly important. The diversity we conserve today may provide the solutions needed to meet tomorrow's challenges. Protecting diversity today strengthens resilience tomorrow. In the next module, we will explore soil biodiversity and climate resilience. Beneath every field lies a hidden world of roots, fungi, microbes, earthworms, and countless other organisms that help sustain agricultural productivity. Understanding these biological networks is essential for building resilient food systems. We look forward to continuing the journey with you in the next module.